Putin is signaling with the presentation of these weapons that Russia may be in an economically difficult situation, but militarily it is on top. And that is an aspect that we shouldn't underestimate. So the signaling goes at least in two ways. It is towards the West, but it's also to the Russian citizens themselves.
Joining us today is Roland Freudenstein, co-founder of the Brussels Freedom Hub. Roland, welcome to our studio.
Thank you, Sofia.
Over the past couple of days, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has been showcasing Russia's new nuclear weapons. And according to Ukraine's Center of Countering Disinformation, they call it as a psychological pressure on the West. What do you think Putin is really trying to achieve with this display?
Well, it's pure posturing. Both weapon systems, the Burevestnik nuclear-driven and potentially nuclear-armed missile, it's a cruise missile, and the intelligent torpedo Poseidon, both weapons are nothing dramatically new. They do not change the military balance between Russia and the West, and they certainly don't have any impact on the Russian aggression in Ukraine. So this is pure saber rattling, as the English expression goes. If you want to know more details about what I think about the weapon systems, go ahead, ask.
For me, it's also interesting that, this showcase of these new nuclear weapons been put in place just after the new sanctions, first sanctions under the second term of Donald Trump in power in the US against Russia. Do you see this connection?
Yes, that is pretty obvious. But, Russia has presented new weapon systems before. So this is not the first time that a new missile or a new weapon of a different kind is presented by Putin. I think besides signaling to the West that Russia might be ready to escalate, this also has a domestic component, at a time when Russian citizens face growing economic hardships, with gasoline being rationed in some parts of Russia, with inflation rampant, with value-added tax going up because the Russian state budget is dwindling. With all these economic disadvantages, Putin is signaling with the presentation of these weapons that Russia may be in an economically difficult situation, but militarily it is on top. And that is an aspect that we shouldn't underestimate. So the signaling goes at least in two ways. It is towards the West, but it's also to the Russian citizens themselves.
And just today, Donald Trump said that the US should immediately restart nuclear testing to stay on equal terms with others right after Putin's nuclear statement. And from your perspective, are we now in the beginning of the new arm race?
That could be. It remains to be seen, of course, but this could be the beginning of a nuclear arms race where both sides modernize their nuclear potentials and try to signal to the other side that if push comes to shove, they're ready to act and to defend themselves. So I think that is the moment that we're in right now.
I would like also to touch on the sanctions, the first sanctions of Donald Trump, as I mentioned, against Putin during his second term. Do you think it signals us a change of the US rhetoric?
Well, it's certainly a change of rhetoric. Whether it's a change of strategy, that still remains to be seen. Because don't forget that the sanctions against two Russian oil companies actually only possibly enter into force on 21st of November. So the announcement that has been made a week ago was nothing else than saying at the 21st of November, such and such measures may be taken, possibly will be taken. But there is no clear declaration that these companies and any Western company that cooperates with them is under sanctions. Not yet. But on the other hand, uh, the announcement itself has already had effects. We heard the famous news item that Lukoil, for example, it is now has decided already to sell off 50% of its international assets, gas stations, what have you, depots, and so on. Um, but but on the other side, selling assets officially doesn't mean that Lukoil isn't trying to somehow circumvent the sanctions by building up shell companies, right? So the same business will go on, but under a different name with a different company in charge. But the money will still flow into Russia's coffers. And so that is the one thing, that the one disadvantage of this time lag of 4 weeks before the sanctions even possibly take place. So the other disadvantage is that, of course, in the meantime, the Western clients of Lukoil and Rosneft can stock up their all their fuel depots by buying even more Russian oil because they know that after that point they will not be able to do this anymore. So again, this I don't understand why Trump has to give Putin 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks time before something even possibly takes effect. And yes, the Russian reaction has been that this is an unfriendly gesture and so on, but who knows whether Putin doesn't manage to convince Trump not to enact the sanctions in the meantime, as he was able to convince Trump not to sell Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. That's uh, that's why I have my doubts whether this action is already a 180-degree change in the US strategy vis-a-vis Russia. But it certainly is the clearest shift we have seen so far. Whether it's a 180-degree development remains to be seen.
And from your perspective, how effective are the sanctions could be, and also taking into account the approval of the 19th sanctions package from the European Union, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky just named that if this pressure continue, that could cost Moscow up to $50 billion a year.
Yeah, so these are significant measures, and exactly let's say, the convergence of European and American sanctions against Russia in the energy sector is very important. So, if Europe and America really work in the same direction, they can achieve a lot. But again, I don't believe that this measures decided in October 2025 will already put Putin in such a corner that he changes his strategy in Ukraine. I'm more of a believer in the theory of the so-called straw that broke the camel's back. At a certain point, all the sanctions and all the international measures against Russia, plus assistance to Ukraine will accumulate to a point where Putin has to seriously change his calculus. But that point may still be a long time away.
Yeah, I just wanted basically to mention that Putin himself also commented on this new sanction package and said that Russia won't bow to pressure from the sanctions, and of course it means that Putin will now go and sit to the negotiation table. So, as you said, should be two components. Do you think that Washington and people in the Washington actually understand the need to have some kind of strategy?
Well, I think first of all, Putin at the moment still believes he can win this war, and that's why he doesn't negotiate. You know, he hasn't gone 1 millimeter away from his maximalist positions of the very beginning of the war. I mean, to a point that even Trump is now infuriated. But uh, you know, the only strategy for the West that I see is to keep on piling up the sanctions and helping Ukraine in a much more decisive way. And that may lead to a situation where a year or two from now, either Putin himself sees that he cannot win the war and he has to completely change his strategic approach, or someone else does it for him in Moscow.
And also, the US still has not ruled out the possibility of sending long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. And that's actually what US Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, said to his recent interview to Bloomberg. And here we can actually see the parallel with the previous US administration, which often took months to approve the new package of support to Ukraine. Do you see this parallel? Because for me, it seems that in Ukraine, we see that we are again on the same line.
Yeah, I can understand the frustration of Ukrainians about Europe and America, and I can certainly share the European frustration about America since January this year. And also, I'm one of those Europeans that believe even the Biden administration was too cautious and too hesitant in supporting Ukraine. But I wouldn't focus that much on the Tomahawk missiles. I also wouldn't focus anymore on the German Taurus missiles. They're just not coming. Okay. Now, what is coming is that Ukraine is rapidly improving its production capacities for mass production of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, but mainly cruise. There is a lot of room for improvement in terms of speed, in terms of throw weight. The warheads are still very small, but the potentials are tremendous. And I think both the US and especially Europe should now focus its main energy on enabling Ukraine to produce these weapons themselves in Ukraine, and therefore make these discussions about a Western weapon system superfluous. You know, Tomahawk is actually, it sounds great, but most of these Tomahawk missiles have to be launched from ships. You would have to bring new infrastructure to Ukraine, the launchers. You would have to train soldiers in launching them, and so on and so on. Tomahawk is much more complex than it sounds. And as I said, for the German Taurus missiles, I don't see them coming. That's a question inside the ruling coalition in Berlin. But the real focus should be to enable Ukraine to produce modern long-range systems themselves.
I'd like also to touch on the topic of the recent meeting between US President and Chinese leader. It was their first meeting after several years. And and after the meeting, actually, Donald Trump said China is ready to help the US to continue to go on with these peace talks and basically to stop the Russian war against Ukraine.
No. Sorry, Sophia.
Yeah,
The last words Xi Jinping did not say. He did
yeah.
not say we want to stop Russia from attacking Ukraine. No.
That was like Western media report.
Yeah. Look, this can mean anything, everything, and
Mhm.
nothing. They just talked about Ukraine, but no decision was taken. Uh, Xi Jinping is not going to force Putin to stop his aggression. That's just not happening. I don't know what Trump imagined, but they both agreed that the war should end. That is what the communique says in the end. And yeah, sure, but that doesn't bring peace 1 second closer. So I would say we can safely forget about the Ukrainian topic in this first meeting. Maybe in later meetings something more concrete comes up, but so far this is just hot air.
So you think that China now has zero interest actually to bring this war to the end?
China would not mind a moderate Russian victory. Okay. I mean, they don't want Putin to triumph in the sense of occupying Kiev tomorrow. But they certainly, what they want least of all, they don't want a Russian defeat, military defeat, which might result in regime change, which might result in chaos in Russia, and China losing its northern junior partner that Russia has become recently. So, in other words, China supports Russia's war effort in more or less covert ways, but without the Chinese purchases of raw materials and energy, Russia would have gone bankrupt already long ago. Plus Chinese deliveries of dual-use products like chips and other semiconductors and other technological goods. All this helps Russia to wage this war. Without China, Russia would already have lost. That's a fact. And that tells me that China is not going to persuade Putin to do anything that he doesn't really want.
Also, one of the top headlines of this week is a 12-point peace plan from European partners. And as Radio Free Europe reports, a 12-point peace plan from Finland actually suggests a ceasefire, a non-aggression act, handing over the Zaporizhia nuclear plant to a third-party limited sanctions relief, and a board of peace chaired by Donald Trump. And we also see some many interesting details, but also according to this media that European officials actually doubt that Russia will agree to this plan, and this plan actually still has not confirmed by the European leaders. It's only the draft. But do you see, first of all, how do you assess this plan? And then do you see that Russia might actually go for this plan if in Kremlin they just actively talk about the readiness for that dialogue?
Well, to start with the last question, no. In its current posture, Russia is not going to accept this plan. For example, because it foresees Western security guarantees for Ukraine, because it states that the frozen assets will be used for Ukrainian reconstruction. And I mean, Russia is even at the moment opposed to the idea of a ceasefire. So no, Russia is not going to accept this plan. but that's not the purpose of the plan. And that brings me to your previous question. Well, the idea here for the Europeans is to signal not to the Russians, but to the United States and to the rest of the world that Europe still has something to say. The plan was quickly put together after the originally announced Budapest summit was cancelled. So the summit between Trump and Putin in Budapest would have been, for the rest of Europe, a pretty bad thing in the sense that Europe didn't play any role there. I mean, the only European present at the summit would have been Viktor Orban, right? And that is terrible news for the rest of Europe. So as soon as this summit was cancelled or postponed, but I don't think it's going to happen, at least not anytime soon. So as soon as that was cancelled, the Europeans quickly said, okay, now we've got to do something to be in the game again, to just signal that, look, we have an idea what should happen. Whether it's going to be accepted by Russia is a different question, but we have an idea. And, all the individual points of the plan have actually been discussed, have been negotiated, have been hotly debated between different stakeholders in Europe and the coalition of the willing. And I think it is high time to put all these ideas together in one document and actually to present it and say to the rest of the world and say, look, this is what we want to happen. And it's not true that Europeans are completely sidelined in the search for just and sustainable peace in Ukraine.
And my last question also about the recent statement of Putin's special envoy, Kirill Dmitriev. We know that already in the US, US Treasury Minister claimed him as a Russian propagandist. But at the same time, this Kirill Dmitriev claims that peace in Ukraine could be possible within a year. What's your take on that?
Look, I have nothing to say about this. I wouldn't take it seriously. I mean, if he talks about peace in Ukraine, what he means is a Russian victory. What he means is Ukraine giving up its sovereignty and its freedom. That is hopefully not possible a year from now, right? So I don't think the majority of Ukrainians want the kind of peace that Mr. Dmitriev has in mind. So I would just completely forget about the statement. It has no value.
Dear Roland, thank you for your time and for this conversation.
Thanks a lot, Sofia.